Hi, my name is Michelle Salazar Perez,
And I'm Cynthia Saavedra.
and we've been working together for the past 15 years as colegas and friends, using Chicana feminist, Black feminist, and womanist theories and methodologies in educational research and beyond. And we're going to base our conversation today on a recent chapter that we wrote together in Carol Taylor, Christina Hughes, and Jasmine Ulmer's Transdisciplinary Feminist Research book. Um, and the title of our chapter is Womanist and Chicana Latina Feminist Methodologies, Contemplations on the Spiritual Dimensions of Research. And Cynthia, do you want to talk a little bit about why we care about this work?
Yeah, so I think for both of us is incorporating womanist and Chicana Latina methodologies as a theoretical framework sort of also led us to include uh, all of the what makes those theories um, special, unique, and different than our traditional training in research methods. And that what makes it, I think, unique and special is that the incorporation of spirituality that tends not to be discussed or brought up in traditional, even critical qualitative research. So for us, I think it was important that if we're talking about womanisms and Chicana feminists or even Black feminisms, that we include that aspect of the theories that just helps us to really decolonize or begin the process of undoing a lot of the old binaries between what's real and unreal, seen and unseen, and bringing in more senses than the traditional five. So I think for us it was important to do that, and also because I think personally we've been engaging in more of that for our own personal growth and evolution, to incorporate the spiritual aspect into our lives.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about this work as well is the connection of mind, body, and spirit, which you touched on um, in your description. And I think that there's very few theoretical kinds of frameworks that lend themselves to um, resuturing a lot of the mind, body, spirit splits that we've experienced through colonization, um, and also through our methodological ways of doing research. So, one of the vehicles that I've been really appreciative of is womanist theories because it centers spirituality, number one, and it also recognizes and centers the acknowledgement of colonialism, oppressions, and empowerment of women of color, Black women in particular, and also other minoritized peoples. And so bringing together a lot of different ways of being, scholars like Layla Maparan really speak to um, the spiritual aspect of ourselves, of our connections with each other, of the earth, of the land. And when we bring this together in thinking about methodologies, it changes how we do research. And I really appreciate that from these theories. And Cynthia, you love to theorize as well from Chicana feminisms. What pulls you or draws you to that theoretical framing?
So for me, Chicana Latina feminisms was, I think the important of first was the focus on the body or the theories in the flesh. So how we move through the world is through the body, and when we pay attention to that, there's theorizing that the body does, right, that in a way we're not in tune with it because we are not taught to focus on the body because of the binaries that the illusion of the binary that we've created between the mind and the body and then spirituality as well. And so that drew me to Chicana and Latina feminists, the way that they talk about lived and embodied experiences and how that creates theory is important. And also because when I read white feminism, coming from that white middle class perspective, I connect to some aspects, but I feel like it's the grounding in women of color experiences that really makes a lot of sense to me and how I live my life in this world. And at the same time, it also is interdisciplinary. So I like that aspect, that it draws from multiple theories and it fuses things. So you can kind of create new ways to see things when you're infusing multiple epistemologies and theories. And so I like that, and intersects with indigenous, transnational, and decolonial lenses, also to sort of challenge the post-conquest colonialities and offer new ways of thinking and being and pedagogies and methodologies. So I think that's what's speaks to me about Chicana Latina feminisms.
Yeah, and I think I know that womanism draws heavily from Chicano feminisms and vice versa. I think that they're really connected with each other, and we always found a natural way to bring these ideas together in a lot of our work. And a lot of what you were speaking to as well, Cynthia, was this notion really of a spiritual praxis or a spiritual activism, which a lot of different Chicana Latina feminists and womanists and Black feminists as well have, and also Indigenous scholars have been utilizing. And some of the spiritual practice that we might engage with is energy work, meditation, forms of healing through curanderos, just different ways of understanding dimensions of illness or dis-ease or imbalance. And through these ideas of energy kind of work that we might think about, that in itself is a form of activism when we're engaging in these transformations within and outwardly. And some of the stuff that I know that we've written a lot about is the notion of inner transformation and outer transformation as being interconnected, and that you can't separate the two. And I think that this really lends itself to really rethinking how we would approach methodology, because a lot of times, at least in our past work, we've talked about how it will talk and focus on the outer work and the outer transformations, but we don't talk about our connection to that and the inner transformations that can occur spiritually and materially. So what are some ways that you think about spiritual activism in your methodologies or research?
I think one example that I discuss and share with you in our chapter is the work that I've done with women or mujeres on the border here in the Rio Grande Valley where I work. And I think what was important is having that grounding in these theoretical frameworks then help, because you have to have that first, right? You have to have that grounding, that connection to the theory deeply. So it's not a lens that I just throw on because it's a lens I want to use. It's a lens that I feel more comfortable using. So then it speaks to me. It's connected with me. So in using those lenses and in being, in the moment that I am wherever spiritually and doing this work, at first, for example, this research was about trying to dispel deficient ideas of the mujeres in regards to literacy and their literate, attainments and whatnot. And so, and although that's also important, and it but what transpired was that connection with the women and being part of that group as also a participant. So sort of challenging the researcher participant binary and just kind of being part of that, and in me asking questions or in them also asking questions, you also then divulge just as much as they are, not only to build the trust, but also because it can naturally happen once you have those connections with people. And so in sharing our stories, it helped me to share and open up wounds that I had when I was a little girl. And I talk about that in the chapter, and how then this research, though, it was also important for dispelling the myth of illiterate women, or deficient women in literacy. It also was a space for us to do inner work and healing work that needed attention, in that moment, in that space, as we came together as just human beings sharing our lives. And a lot of times they would say things like, "I love coming to this because I me desahogo," which means I vent, I let, kind of you let go of things that are bugging you, or the stress. You're able to just like take a breath by being able to release it. And I saw that just as equally as important as then the research that I may present about dispelling their deficient labels, right? And I think that's the aspect that we never focus on in research, is that healing process that can happen for both participants and the researcher. And so I don't know, that's to me an example of another kind of dimension of the research that's bringing spirituality can do. And a lot of these wounds are coming from gendered, coming from racialized expectations, oppressions. And so in some ways, the spirituality is also healing those colonial wounds. And that's important, because then as you release that, then, the outer work can other stuff can happen. You feel more empowered, you feel more, to go on with your day, and releasing that is important.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was thinking about intergenerationally, how we can carry these colonial wounds, and the importance spiritually of acknowledging them and finding ways for healing. And in that, though, takes an acknowledgement of the spiritual realm. And that's something that we recommend at the end of our chapter, is that we feel like it's not really spoken a lot about in any of our mainstream or dominant academic professional spaces, even those that might be critical, or even in the post-humanist turn. We don't find a whole lot of talk or discussion about spirit. And so that's been something that we've really contemplated about being able to make it part of more of our dialogue, our discourse, in how it's, whether we realize it or not, often infused in everything that we do professionally and methodologically, and in our own lives, and how those are all connected. And so that's one of the things that we advocate for regularly, is being able to have it not hidden as spirit being something that's a part of us, but that we have a long way to go on, I think, even within our own work, because even with my own work, I can speak for myself that I hesitate a lot of times to speak publicly about some of the ways that spirit influences me and my decisions that I make, professionally and in my life, because it isn't as accepted. So I think that that's one place where we can kind of work on, even myself, I can work on and being able to speak about it more, because I'll be having conversations with somebody, in Australia, who's like, I'm thinking of somebody who's doing their dissertation, and she's a woman of color who has experienced racialized oppressions, and she's doing her work in that area. And there's a lot of wounds that come up in that for herself and for the participants and collaborators. Um, and we talked about spiritual practices that she was engaging in with crystal healing and other forms where it was there, but it was hidden until we opened the conversation to be able to talk about that. So I think that that's something that you and I, Cynthia, have always hoped for, is that there's more emphasis on knowing that these kind of more than human spaces exist, and they have for a very long time.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That is so important. Well, this ends our presentation slash conversation, and we thank you for attending and listening to our conversation here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're so thrilled to be a part of this panel as well, and this conference. So thank you so much for the time and the space. And we look forward to listening to other people's ideas throughout the conference.